I think we're live. If anybody out there in the world can hear us, please let us know in the chat because this has been a crazy day. I got an email that my Google Plus account was suspended, so I couldn't do the simple mode I usually do when I'm doing these live Friday lives to add to the gremlins that usually show up during the show. So I know there's a delay. If you can hear me, if you can see leaves on your screen and my hands moving, please let me know.
People can hear us.
Oh,
People can see us.
awesome.
The picture looks great on my
Oh,
end.
yay. Okay. Now I got to remember how to teach art because I've had to go in my brain and learn how to use an encoder again. So, oh boy. It's been one of those days. Actually, no, it was actually a perfect day until about 10 minutes ago when I went to start the stream and it went a little
I got here
kablooey.
about 10 minutes ago. Maybe I was the one that
No,
brought the bad luck.
I got an email saying my Google Plus account's been suspended, but I didn't think anything of it because I never post to Google Plus, but apparently they think I've been spamming. So, I don't know, it's just one of those things. So what we're going to do is a packing tape masking technique, and this is the reference photo. It is on my blog if you want to print it out, or you can just follow along with me. It's completely up to you. And I did a little sample this morning, a little 15-minute sample just to make sure the technique worked because we're going to use packing tape on our watercolor paper. So we really I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to tear the paper when we went to use it, and it worked really well. So you might want to use this technique when you have a large area that you want to mask out because masking fluid is expensive, it's smelly, it takes a long time to dry, and it can be hard to remove. So this is just a quick, cheap, and easy alternative. We're going to begin by sketching. And by the way, I wanted to let you know that this video is brought to you by jerrysartorama.com, our very understanding patient sponsors who sponsor the live shows even though you never know what's going to happen. I have linked to all the supplies I'm using today over at Jerry's. So if there's anything that you're looking for, you can find the link in the video description, which I do think I managed to copy that all over from the original place. It's wow. I'm glad the encoder's working because the whole reason I went back to the simple mode is because my encoder stopped working. So we're going to start off by making some leaf shapes. And you know, the cool thing about this is you can do it this way or this way. So if you're looking at the reference photo, doesn't matter. You can do it either way. I think I'll do it this way. So I'm going to actually start with one of my leaves in the middle so I can kind of space them out. They're kind of like almond shape. And I can draw them a little bit darker than I normally would so that you can see them. And also I think the packing tape helps kind of take some of the graphite off my paper, so I don't think it'll be too bad. I wouldn't draw it so dark at home, but that's why I'm doing it kind of on the darker side. And of course, if you wanted to print it and trace it, you totally could do that too. I just didn't do a printable pattern because they are very simple simple shapes to do. But there's nothing wrong with tracing because tracing is going to teach you how things really look instead of how you think they look. So if anyone gives you a hard time about tracing something, you can tell them that it's another valid way to learn how to draw. I do recommend having a soft eraser handy. So if you do have any extra lines, you can erase them without damaging your paper. Any white plastic one is fine. This is a Factus, but I use the kind from the dollar store, and those work fine too. Just look for the white plastic, just the white ones. They're going to be fine. You don't want the abrasive ones. I got that first one there. I'm going to put one right next to it, fairly close. If you just want to do 3, that would look pretty too. 4 looks nice as well. It's up to you. I thought this would be really pretty hung up for fall time. How is everybody in the chat? Boy, the best people. They're so understanding.
They are. No, everyone's pretty good. Everyone's saying hello. We got nice group so far. A lot of the usuals, new people.
And I think it's only fair that we have no audio problems today because
yes.
We've had our share of technical difficulties before the stream.
And we can't even blame it on the kids because they're all at school.
I know. So these leaves are alternating the stem direction. So keep that in mind. So we got point up, stem up, and this is point up here. I keep sketching on this nice watercolor paper like I'm in a sketchbook, being kind of using a lot of sketchy lines. A little stem there. I want to exaggerate the stem on that one. And we'll get one more here. Now the packing tape is only about 2 inches wide, so we might need to double up to be able to cover some of these leaves. If you don't want to have to double up packing tape, if you're a little nervous, you can make them a little smaller. And I wouldn't get too detailed on the edges because we're not going to cut out all those little serrations. If we need to bring that shape back, we can use a gel pen. That's why I put that as an optional tool, or you can use a colored pencil if you want those, that serrated edge. I'm just afraid if I do too much digging with an X-Acto knife that I might end up with some staining and some issues from that.
Laura R. Negative painting how? Any good videos to watch or a class I can take?
Negative painting. There's an artist called Brenda Swenson, I believe is her name, and she has some great demos on her website for free, and I believe she also has a book and classes. So she's probably one of the most talented negative painters I've seen. I would definitely give her a look. I can't remember her blog name, but I'm sure if you just search her name, it'll come up. But she does some beautiful stuff. I think she would be the artist too you would think of when you, like, her work is kind of iconic for that technique. There's also on the Craftsy blog a simple demonstration. You can also search Pinterest and it will link you to tutorials, but I know the Craftsy blog has a step-by-step, and it might have been by Brenda, I'm not sure, but it's very similar to her technique. Okay, so we have got this all sketched out. So we're going to take our packing tape, which is just from this actually came from the post office, but any brand will be fine. And our goal is just to get a mask off our leaf. If your leaf is not too wide, you can go right over it with one layer. Don't press super down on the tape yet. We are going to press down the edges, but I wouldn't recommend totally covering the pressing down the tape, just because you don't want to make it more difficult to remove in areas you don't need it. So I'm going to double up here because I have some of that sticking over, and that one's pretty wide too, so I think that would take a couple layers of tape. Overlapping's fine, it's not going to hurt anything. Although you shouldn't drag it out so much. I'm wasting quite a bit of tape by doing it that way. Try to keep your wrinkles out of your tape. This tape's a little on the thick side, so that actually probably makes it a little easier to work with than like a thinner tape, but both should work. Okay, now we're going to take our X-Acto knife and we are going to cut away the excess tape. You want a nice sharp X-Acto knife. And I'm not bothering about any sort of serrations here. And if you find that you need a little bit more, you can always pull up a piece and tape it down there. So I was like, geez, I think I was a little too stingy on that side, so I'm just going to move a little bit over here from that scrap and just kind of cut around it so I don't have a flat edge. So that's why you don't want to press it down too much right now, because you gotta pull off the excess. And it should pull up pretty easy. Sometimes you gotta, like, if it's the tip or the stem, you have to help it. And you can probably see that first leaf a little bit better if I tip it and get the light on that. We're going to go around and do that for each of these leaves. So if you're watching the replay, you can skip ahead a couple minutes until we're done this. It probably won't take a couple minutes, but 30 seconds or so. And so what I'm trying to do is just cut through the tape, but not cut through the paper. So if it scribes the paper a little bit, that's all right. It'll just give us an extra outline, and there's going to be a little bit of a drop shadow on those anyway. But I don't want to I don't want to cut through the watercolor paper or leave a big gouge. I'm not going to pull up this side till I get this one cut out, just because they do share a piece of tape. And you want a sharp knife because you want it to cut through pretty effortlessly. And I don't know how long you could leave the packing tape on, but it is a tape, so I just like masking fluid. I wouldn't leave it on indefinitely. I would try to finish it up, you know, fairly in a day or two, so you don't have any acid or any sort of migration from your tape. I have no idea what's in the tape, but most adhesives will leave some sort of residue if left on indefinitely. Masking fluid gets a lot harder to remove the longer it stays on your paper, and I'm sure tape is probably similar. Best thing about it is that it's clear and you can see exactly where you drew. Now, if we had to paint that in with masking fluid, that would take us a lot longer, and then removing it would take us quite a while to rub all that fluid off. You have any questions?
We've had several, but I was kind of holding off while you were using a
Okay.
craft knife.
Probably a wise
I
idea.
was like, because I know how I am. If I'm using a craft knife, I need to have concentration. All right, let me get back up where questions were.
Oh, I did add a well, not really frequently asked questions, but a product recommendation page. So if they have, you know, I just kind of put like the watercolors I'd recommend first, the pastels I'd recommend first, kind of like my favorites. So hopefully that will help people, because we get questions every week about what's your favorite this and what's your favorite that. So I'm hoping that will help people, so they don't have to wait, you know, for a week to to ask a question like that.
Kendall McCauley, I just purchased the Heritage 300-pound paper. How does it compare to Arches, which is usually my go-to?
I have not used the Heritage, so I couldn't tell you, but probably somebody in chat could, or maybe later on comments in the replay. I'm using a bone folder, but you could use any sort of clean plastic thing to burnish down the edges. So basically that just means I'm pressing down that tape on the edges because I don't want water to get underneath or paint to get underneath here.
Terry J. Dime Store Diva TV. Why do three of my White Knight's watercolors look very gel-like and dry like alligator skin? I have seen this with other paints too, and I am baffled.
It's probably the pigments that are in those particular colors. Some are very hard to dissolve and kind of minerally. Like I get that look on whenever I use Viridian. It's kind of hard to reconstitute, and it does get kind of that scaly, jelly look. So it's probably just whatever the pigment makeup is. It's giving it that quality. I'm pressing down my outside tape while I'm at it, so I'll have a nice border. Now another thing I want to sketch on really quick is the division between the wood planks. I'm just going to sketch. I don't need to make it as wide as it is, because I can always paint that width, but I just want to get those planks in there. You could use a ruler if you want them real straight. Actually, that's not a bad idea, wasn't I?
You are making people really nervous with this whole thing so far, like with the tape and getting the tape off and the cutting
and the knife. I just moved the knife out of my way.
People are very very nervous.
It'll be okay. The scariest thing was just getting you guys here. You guys made it to the show. That's the hardest part of today, I think. Okay. So now we're going to mix up some grays, and I am using my Turner watercolors. I also have some Yarka in here too, because I had cleaned out a palette and I tried to combine everything. So my palette's kind of messy, so I grabbed a plate to mix on. So what I'm going to do is make a wash of gray using burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. we're going to be using burnt sienna and burnt umber so that we can get a couple varying browns. There's my burnt sienna here. I'll just slide over my plate. I got colors on here I'm not going to use, but I just didn't want to wash it and waste them. And some ultramarine.
Ooh, excuse me. I had a seltzer before I came over.
I always get hiccups whenever I have any carbonated
burps.
stuff.
I get burps.
All right. And what I'm going to do is just add some more water to this because I can just brush on this because it's, you know, I can just wet it with this color because it's a pretty, you know, it's just a flat wash, you know, just a plain old wash. I don't have to use any water. Now look at how well that resists. That's protecting those leaves on there. So we're going to be able to paint these planks of wood as if the leaves aren't there, which is going to make it so much easier. And that's why I wanted to mask off the leaves, because if we had to paint around all of this, every time we wanted to put in any veining or wood grain or texture, it would just be, it would go from being easy and fun to being just a chore and a pain. So we want our paintings to spark joy, not annoy. It's been a lot of annoy sparking this morning. Oh, and I can see that I missed that little bit of tape right there. So this is a little dangerous because I'm digging in with my fingernails on wet paper, so I might end up with a little mark, but it's wood grain, so it'll look like just a
nail hole
a ding or something. Yeah. All right. So now if I want to add any soft shadows around the leaves, I can do that. I think I would probably move. Now this is where I might use a less absorbent brush because I wouldn't want so much water in my mix. So if I grab a synthetic brush and mix up some color, I'm just by default not going to get so much water in it because these brushes don't hold up that much water. So it's good to have some in your stash. And since the paper is still pretty damp, it's not going to be a really rough or hard edge. I can just go right in there and add those little bit of like a drop shadow kind of. There's a shadow on the picture. I'm not sure if it's cast by like a railing or maybe the photographer, but it does look a little odd, like it probably doesn't belong there. That's this big kind of block area here. So I'm just kind of imagining it's not there and putting my shadow to the left of the leaves. And we'll be adding more shadows, and I'm kind of also just kind of feathering it out with my brush so that I'll end up getting a little bit of wood graining as we're doing it. So this is not a big deal. If you get something wrong, it doesn't really matter at this stage. It's not gonna add up to too much. It's just gonna give us a little bit of ambiance. If you want there to be any color, it looks like there's some like faded, like bluish gray paint on here, and I really like the way that looks. So the color I'm going to use for that is from the Turner set. By the way, that Turner set is on sale for $19.99. Yeah, it's back. It's out of stock right now, but you can buy it for that price, and I'll ship it to you when it comes in. I've done that before when they've had something out of stock, but the price is really good. So, you know, you might have to wait a little while for it. I can't remember how far backward they were, but that's one of their staple products, so it's not like they're out of it. At least they never have been before. They sell out quite frequently, and then they just restock. And this is a color that I've only seen in the Turner line. It's kind of like a cobalt teal. It is a cobalt-based color. They call it turquoise, but it's got a little more body to it than other paints, so if you're doing a technique like this, I can even brush this over when it's dry, and it's got enough opacity to it that it covers up and it remains nice and vibrant. I also grabbed my pastel pencils because one of my viewers, Diane, had asked about them the other day, and I just used them in a card, but I thought that might be kind of nice to grab some out and show you them on a painting. And they're also a really good kind of like rescue type of product because if you get if like you lose your lights or something's not standing out enough, you can go in with a pastel pencil and kind of bring it back. So now I'm gonna use a fan brush, and this you can use any fan brush, any stiff fan brush. So it could be like a hog bristle brush. This is a Mimic Hog. It's a synthetic bristle, so it's got that stiffness of a hog brush, but it does not contain actual animal hair, so that's kind of nice. And I'm going directly in with burnt sienna, and I'm just going to show you here what I'm doing. My brush is wet, but it's not going to hold a ton of water because it's so stiff. It's not that absorbent. It's typically what you use for oil or acrylics, and I'm going right into the pan. So I'm getting, like, I'm loading this up with a lot of concentrated paint, so it's right from the dry pan.
Joe was saying, for your info, that pigment that the blue you're just using, it's the same pigment as other cobalt teals, PG50.
Oh, thank you, Joey. And I'm just going to start on the tape and drag down, and you can give a little bit of a wiggle to it if you want. It's going to fade out a little bit because our paper is still damp, but this is going to give us some good wood graining. And don't worry, you're going to have the hot mess stage here, and that's all right. Pretend like the leaves aren't there. Pretend the planks, like the separations in the board aren't there. And then we're going to grab some burnt umber. I am rinsing my brush and just wiping off the extra paint, dipping it into my dried burnt umber pan, which is a little bit darker and cooler. They come from the same pigment family. Iron oxide pigments. And we're just building up layers because it's going to give us that beautiful texture and weathered look. Now, something you could do also to frame your picture a little bit more is add more dark to the edges and corners and just kind of drag it up a little bit, and that will just kind of give you this, like, a little bit of a frame, which will just be pretty when you go to display it. I think something like this could even be, you could do something seasonal, and this could just be like a piece of like twine over a mirror, and just clip this on with some pretty, you know, clothespins or clips, or they always have those cute decorative clips at Target in the dollar spot. You could use something like that. It would be really pretty, and put it up for a month or so, and then you could switch it out with something for winter. Okay, and now I'm going to dry this, and while I'm drying it, if you have any questions, I think that the mic that we're using is going to be all right with the heater, hopefully, because it's not mic, it's the mic on the camera, so hopefully it's working. I'll speak up though if it's not.
JD, couldn't you just use painter's tape to make the mask?
Okay, Jay asks if we can use painter's tape to make the masks. You can. The reason I'm using the packing tape is because it's clear and I can see where I drew. And painter's tape is blue, and I might not be able to see through it unless I drew it really, really dark. Could they hear that? Did they say? Oh, good. Okay. All right, I think that's dry enough. Now you can like take a rag and get a little water on it if you want to remove some of the paint from the leaves. In case you're worried about dragging your hand through it or something, you can just wipe that off. You don't really need to, but that way you won't get your hands in it. But when we go to remove it, we're just going to lift up the end with like with our X-Acto knife, so it's not like we're rubbing it like masking fluid, because with masking fluid, if you had all that paint on there and you went to rub it to remove it, you're going to smear that and get streaks on your white area. So if you're using masking fluid for this, you would want to clean off as much of that dried paint as you can. Now another cool thing on this reference photo here, we've got these deep shadows that are between the planks, and we also have these kind of rusty wood screws. So for the rusty wood screws, what we're going to do is find a pen or a marker that's got a round cap, And we're gonna make up some nice dark brown paint, and we're gonna use our just dropped my brush here. We're gonna use some of the burnt umber and ultramarine blue, and we're mixing it up with our synthetic brush so we don't end up with a lot of water. See how that's nice and thick? It's almost like heavy cream. And we'll make a nice, almost black color to stamp with, and that's gonna give us our screw areas. It will basically give us kind of the indented area where the screw is gonna be. And I am just gonna roll this marker cap in it, so I try to get it mostly on the edge, but if some gets on the middle, it's not a big deal, because it does have like kind of a raised middle in there. And I'm just gonna stamp these in there, and it's gonna give us this cool kind of industrial look. Ironically, I actually have a stamp, I think, of a screw top. You will have to reload it every time because this is like hard plastic. It's not really absorbing the paint, it's just kind of grabbing some of it. And on the reference photo, they have it on both sides. I'm just trying to decide whether I want just the top or on both ends. Yeah, well, I guess I'll do the other end too. Oh, that does look kind of cool. It kind of gives it more of like a modern, like a modern art look, a pop art look. How many people do we have hanging out today?
We have 352.
Oh, nice. I don't think we've been over for 300 in a while, have we? Because the kids are back in school, probably.
Yeah. People are like, I have time.
Okay. And then in the middle of that, I'm switching to a small synthetic. This is a number 4 Ebony Splendor. Anything it just not very absorbent, because what we want to do is pick up the burnt sienna like on its own, kind of right from the pan, and we want it really thick. Okay, so I actually just work the brush in the pan until the paint does not look watery anymore. It looks almost pasty. So I know I have kind of a thick application there. And that's going to help me get that rusty texture. And I'm going to go fill in these circles with that color. And you will have to reload quite a bit because your brush isn't too wet, so your paint's going to want to drag a little bit. I'm also going to grab a little yellow ochre. That's going to lighten it up a little bit. See that? Because we'll put our, like, the shadows for the little Phillips slots. You can see how I'm resting my hand right here. If that had a lot of paint on it, I could end up smudging, so that's another reason to wipe it off. Actually, I could just turn my paper around and rested my hand on the table. That's a better idea, probably. Again, it's the burnt sienna and yellow ochre I'm using here. And the yellow ochre is mostly adding a little opacity and warming it up and lightening it without making it transparent. These are technically transparent watercolors, but certain pigments have more opaque properties. Your mineral inorganic pigments. Do you have any more questions?
Caught up at the moment. We have people out west where the fires have been.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about how areas where some of our fans are, the air quality's been real bad.
Oh, that's too bad. I just feel like this is a week of natural disaster. I feel so bad for...
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw in the Bangor Daily, they had the article about the couple that went down to St. Martin's and got married last week, and they're stuck down there.
Oh, no.
I know a bunch of those people that are down there.
Oh, wow.
And they're stranded in this bunker that
Oh
was at the resort
man.
hotel with no power, no running water. Well, they have power because they got a generator, and a couple of the guys that I know fixed it.
Yep.
But they're stuck in
Oh
this,
my goodness.
a room the size of your studio with 50 people, and they're all
Wow.
using buckets.
Oh man.
And they don't, as far as they can tell, it's going to be 4 weeks before they can get home because there's no airport, there's
Wow.
no way to get them out,
That is
and
scary. I'm surprised they didn't send home people sooner, like
well,
the hotels.
some of the guests that had left, but the wedding party and the bride and groom were planning on staying
Right. Oh
for
geez.
a
Yeah, of
vacation for their
course.
honeymoon, and by the time it was too late to get them out. They couldn't. They tried to get out before, but all the flights were booked. There
Yeah.
was no way for them to
Oh,
get
that's
out.
true. Because they're pretty booked anyway
Yeah.
in that area.
So I guess because her parents live here in the Bangor area, and they've been trying to find some way to get them out, but as of right now, it doesn't look like they're gonna get home for another 4 weeks.
4 weeks?
Yeah, because
Oh
there's no
my
airport down there.
gosh.
The airport was destroyed.
Oh. Well, hopefully they make it home safe. Well, it sounds like they've got a safe place to be at least, but boy. I'm using that mix of burnt umber and ultramarine blue that we use to stamp our little circles on, and I'm making the divisions between the planks. I'm using a another synthetic brush. It's a number 8 or 10. Let me take a peek here. I think I've rubbed off the number. It's an 8. And I'm just trying to kind of keep it fairly centered on that line because your shadows will be really dark in the middle where it's really where the crack is really deep and you can see far down where it's really shadowed, and then it will get lighter as it goes out. So I just want to get that center part where it's really dark for the moment. And now I'm going to go back in with that fan brush, and I'm going to actually get into that dark color, but I'm going to fan it out a bit. So this is waterier than we used before with the fan brush, because I don't want to have really dark dark streaks, but I do want to add some more weathering in here. You can use a fan brush two ways. You can use it to put your streaks like that. You can also go in on the side, kind of tap in some bigger streaks. I'll mix up a little bit more of that. That kind of does a nice job for wood graining too when you go in on the side, because you still get that multi kind of grain look. Multi-grain, that's not what I mean, like multi-feathery lined graininess. Care. Oh, is that a sneeze or a cough?
Cough. A little tickle in my throat.
It's probably all the...
It's all the talk from the fires out west.
Yeah. So when you do your graining lines, make sure that you're going through you're going down the entire board. So you're going, if you go up to the leaf that you, the leaf you bring it down the other way as well. I just realized that if I'm going this way, it works really good with the fan brush. I need to turn my paper around if I'm going to go the other way, because then the curve of the bristles kind of work against it. So if I want to do this one, have that go that way, I want to go in this way, so it will just be a little more natural. Hopefully the furnace isn't too loud. Okay, so now I'm also going to take this brush and just kind of dust along those plank grooves, and that's just going to give us the slightly a little bit darker, like as it goes from dark to light on the edges, as it comes around the edge of, as the light comes kind of around the edge of the plank. Makes it look a little bit more natural. Okay. Now we're going to go in with a smaller round. I think I actually want one of my Mimic ones. Might have rolled off my table. I've had quite a morning, quite an adventure, adventurous morning here.
Thank goodness it's Friday, right?
Seriously.
I will be right back. I have to use the lady.
Okay.
Seltzer's working its way out.
So I will not be able to respond to anything for the next few minutes until she gets back. I'm going to take a little burnt umber and I'm going to add it to some ultramarine blue to make a shadow color. And this will be kind of the direct shadow from the from each of the leaves. And I am having enough water in this so I won't have to keep reloading. I don't want it super dark. It's not going to be as dark as like the grooves between the planks or the, we're going to put a tiny little shadow around our little screws too. This is not quite so dark because the leaves are pretty, not translucent, but they will allow some light to pass through. They're blocking the light, but they're not like blocking light like a piece of wood would. They're not that thick. So what I'm going to do is just kind of look at my reference photo, and if I show you here, the light is coming from this direction. It's putting a cast shadow from each leaf directly to the left side of it. So that's what we want to do here. And it's going to it gets a little bit bigger if the leaf is lifted up at all. And that's kind of going to give you that kind of trompe l'oeil effect, the fool the eye, and make it look really three-dimensional when we paint our leaves. And that one, actually, that shadow goes right over as far as that, because that leaf is picked up from the bottom a little bit. Now on the reference photo, there is this big shadow. I think it's probably like on a dock and it's a railing or something. So I'm gonna pretend that's not there because it doesn't really make sense to have it there in this painting. But you can do what you like. Just make sure you don't have any little puddles. I'm just gonna dab that right there. It looks a little puddly. And I'm going to mix up a little bit more. I'm going through this the shadow color very quickly. Again, burnt umber and ultramarine blue with enough water so it's kind of like a 2% milk consistency. And this one we have like a little, the leaf actually makes like a distinct shadow, and there's actually a little bit of light kind of between the stem and the shadow, and then we're going to just bring that around. It looks like this one does go over to that other leaf. I'm making a kind of a little bump where the two boards, where the shadow crosses over the two boards, just to give it a little bit more of a realistic look. And this final one over here, again, it is real tight at the tip of the leaf where it's touching the dock, and then it gets wider. And another reason we want this to be kind of, this shadow to be thin and translucent, is we want to be able to see that wood grain. Now this is kind of weird. The light goes through it, and then the tip of the leaf adds another little bit of a shadow. Like the light gets underneath the leaf there a little bit. It's a little tricky. And when I do have a weird shadow, I tend to like to feather some of the edges as it gets away, kind of diffuse that a little bit, and makes it look a little bit more natural. Okay, now we're going to switch to a smaller brush, and you can use a synthetic for this. You'll just have to reload more often, but it will keep your color dark, and that's what you want. So those two same colors again, burnt umber, and again I'll show you my palette, as messy as it is. I'm trying to get a bunch of pigment, and I'm going to just put that right there. I don't want to add a bunch of water to it. I'm just trying to pick up as much paint as possible because I want this dark. I want it strong, not a lot of water. I don't want it to be runny, and I'm going to grab some of this ultramarine and mix them together, so I really am going for like a black I just want enough water in there that my paint will move, basically. And then on each of these little screws, you'll see if you're looking at the reference photo that each one is a little bit different. We don't want to paint them all the same or they're not going to look very natural. So this first one, we're going to put a little shadow here on the outside of the screw, kind of in the hole where it's set. And then I'm going to put the little X in there for the little slot for the screwdriver. This one's pretty dark all the way around, so I'm going to almost outline it. Hopefully my hand's not in the way. If I hold it back further on the brush, you'll be able to see better, but I won't have so much control, so I may mess it up. Just vary the direction of the screws a little bit each time, like the way the pluses go. And again, if you're watching the replay, you could just skip ahead until I'm done these little screws here. Now this one is kind of a diffuse shadow, so I'm going to clean my brush off. I'm going to blot it, and I'm going to spread the shadow out a little bit. And then I'm going to let that dry before I put the detail of the little screw slot in there. And if you have any questions during this kind of repetitive process, just let me know, and that would be a great time to answer some. Oh, type the word question in all caps so Sarah doesn't miss it.
Marie Carlson, the synthetic brush that doesn't add so much water, is it an acrylic brush?
One is. I really like this one. This is an Aqualon. Unfortunately, Jerry's doesn't sell this, but they do have, I think it's called Polar Flow. They have a line that's got the scraper with the scraper acrylic handles. And the great thing about this is if you leave it in the water by mistake overnight, your brush isn't ruined. Like my, like I love this brush, but I left it in overnight and I totally, I know the paint shipped and it was such a bummer. So I definitely am a big fan of the acrylic handles. I don't know how, I think I ended up really loving the Aqualons because I took a class and the instructor had us use Aqualons and she sent us home with two. And it was actually an acrylic class. It was like at a decorative painting retreat. And I just really, I thought they held up really well. And for me, an acrylic paint, I tend to kill brushes. So that kind of stuck in my head as these are a good brush to have. If you drag your strokes for the screw slots out from the center, you'll get nice tapered ends. Hopefully you can see right there what I mean. You just kind of drag the marks out. Oh, there's that little brush. It was stuck to my tape that I was looking for. We'll get back to you, little brush. Don't worry.
Bev Roberts, how can I avoid hard edges, and is there a way to fix them after the paint is dry?
The best way to avoid hard edges, and some paper is really prone to it, paper with a lot of sizing and a cellulose paper, the best way to avoid it is to keep your paper uniformly damp while you're working. And so like if I was painting this leaf and I painted it all yellow and then I'm like, I'm going to go in with another color, if I have parts of the leaf that's dry and parts that are wet, I'm going to get hard edges where I don't want them. So I either need to wait for it all to dry before I go back in with another color, or I need to do it while it's all that same uniform wetness. Cotton paper generally it just balances itself out a lot better, so you're less likely to get hard edges. Whereas like a heavily sized cellulose paper, you're much more prone to get hard edges. And sometimes it's desirable if you want to force some blooms, you're doing something where you want that texture. But a lot of times it's just because your paper is not drying uniformly. And sometimes we do it on purpose, and sometimes it's not what we want. But that's why it happens. You might have little cracks and splits on the wood, and that's what I did right there. I just dragged some of that shadow out, and basically just shows you there's like a crack in the wood. I'll do the same thing there too.
Tiffany Gray, when I have stray brush hairs, what is the proper way to treat them? Pull out, cut, or train back into formation?
Oh, and a brush. I usually would just snip it, unless they come out really easily. You could try just kind of like going like maybe like that gently, and if they come out great, if not, I would just snip it. I don't really have that issue too much, so I do notice like some, I think maybe it's more common with certain brands. It might be more common with natural hair brushes, I'm not sure, because I don't typically use natural hair brushes. I have some older ones, but by the time they're as old as mine are, if they're going to lose their hair, they've already lost it. It's all, you tend to shed when you first get them. This screw here has a lot of shadow, and I'll show you. Obviously it was set in really deep, so it's really shadowed in there, and it's also got some kind of cracked wood around it. I really think that looks interesting, so that's what I'm going to really accentuate for this screw here. And this one is, then the next one is very opposite. It's very high set. There's just a tiny little bit of shadow. It's mostly highlighted. Well, I'm glad the encoder works. I've been hesitant to try it because it just stopped working one day, but it's working again. So I guess I'll use the I'll use this from now on, since Google Plus wants to part ways with me apparently.
Well, to heck with Google Plus then.
That's so weird. It's like, who even uses Google Plus anymore?
Well, and they're certainly not helping their cause by just randomly suspending.
I actually thought it was a spam. I thought like if I clicked on the link, then it would like take me to some Middle Eastern website and give my computer a virus. All right. I think I want to have a little more color on the wood. I really like that kind of cobalt turquoise color. And I'm just going to kind of dry brush it on with a small synthetic brush and see what I end up with. I might want to add more with a bigger brush, but I'm just going to throw some of that in the darker areas. Oh, I see. I did forget a little screw in the corner, but I think I'm just going to leave it undone.
Miss Groves, do you think having a reference picture is essential?
I don't think it's essential. It depends on how you paint. If you're painting something from your imagination, I think it's really helpful as far as having. Well, for me, maybe it's a bit of a crutch. I like being able to like look at the way the light's coming in and look at the subtleties. But the more I find that like the more that I paint out in nature in real life, the less I need it, just because I can recall how like the light hits things and how it looks. It's really nice for teaching because then you can see exactly, like you can't look into my brain, but if I show you the reference photo, this is what I'm trying to get. It becomes a lot easier. But like stuff I paint all the time, like roses, different flowers, stuff like that, I don't need a reference photo because I've practiced so much. So I think it just depends, how familiar you are with the subject you're painting, and how much you feel like you want a little bit of image to rely on or to lean on. Because this brush isn't very absorbent, I do have to reload quite a bit, and I'm reloading it right from the dry pan of color. Just want it to kind of look like some paint has been, you know, that's still, most paint has been rubbed off, but there's still a little bit there. And so doing this with like a semi-opaque color like a cobalt works out really well. Okay, so now I'm just gonna hit this real quick with a dryer, and I've got a little paint on my hand I want to clean off before I get that somewhere I don't want it. And then we can remove our tape and we can start painting our leaves.
Mary shows, is it necessary to dry your brushes brush side down? I can lay mine flat, and I am also getting some splayed hairs in my brushes.
No, I lay mine flat after I take them out of the water, and then I throw them in a jar later. And
handle side down with the brushes.
Yeah, brush tip up. It really shouldn't hurt anything. You can always put like a, just like I don't know if you have an old ashtray or something, so and you can rest your brushes in the little grooves, or get yourself a little brush rest. I didn't know they still made ashtrays, but when I was in Canada, they had ashtrays at like gas stations and stuff for sale.
Yeah.
I think they might even have them at like the dollar store or something. But you could always just take a piece of polymer clay and roll out a log and put your make little finger divots in there and make yourself a little brush rest. All right, so to remove this, I'm going to use my knife so I don't smear any of that dried paint on the tape itself. Try to lift up an edge. Try not to gouge your paper. Once you get a little piece sticking up, you can peel off the tape. Again, I'm going to recommend you fold the tape back on itself like I'm doing there. And that should prevent any pulling of the paper. And I'm just going to toss that right in the trash. And I'm wondering if contact paper might not work because it might not be a strong enough bond. It might actually let the paint seep under. I always wanted to try that Eclipse masking tape, like for rubber stamping, but I've never got my hands on any. It's kind of hard to find. I wonder if that would work for watercolor if it's too papery. Have you ever used that, the Judikins Eclipse?
I haven't. I don't know. I guess it would depend on what kind of what kind of finish it had on the side, like on the top. Like if it was real waxy, it'd probably be okay.
Yeah, I can't remember though.
If it's more similar to washi tape, it probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hold up.
Oh, I just love peeling off a mask. It's funny how so many techniques, like from stamping, can bleed over into watercolor or painting, or I mean, I feel like everything can bleed over to one another as far as arts and crafts go. All right. So what we're going to be doing is jumping from from one leaf to another, so that way we don't have to hang around and wait for things to dry. So basically what we want to do is kind of look at the base color for each leaf. So here we've kind of got orangey into red. Here we've got mostly yellow. Here we've got, we've got a variety of colors here. We want to put a wash down on each of these first. So by the time, this leaf is dry, I will have just put my wash on that, so we can just keep skipping around and we don't have to waste too much time. I'm going in with a number 8 round mimic because it's nice and absorbent. And these are pretty small areas. You probably don't have to pre-wet them, but if you have a paper that tends to give you hard edges, like a viewer just mentioned, then go ahead and wet it first. That's going to help it retain a more uniform dampness, so you don't end up with your hard edges. And I usually don't go right up to the edge, just because that's where I'll put my pigment in, and it will wick in just fine. So I'm going to mix up some of my, I think this is, let me look at the permanent yellow. Is it permanent? Yeah, permanent yellow. And some pyrrole red. Actually, permanent scarlet or pyrrole scarlet or permanent scarlet. Actually, either of those Permanent red or Pyrrole Scarlet will be fine. I don't want to make it quite as red as the leaf is in the photo yet, because I'll want to layer up, and red is a tricky color, especially to photograph or to film, because I think it confuses the camera. It washes out really easily. If you need more control with your brush, hold it closer to the ferrule, which is that metal part. If you want a looser stroke, you want to hold it further back. And grab a little more yellow. Now I'm going to fill in the stem, even though the stem will be repainted in a darker red when we're done. And I don't want a white outline on this. I can have a little bit of a white outline, just like a little glimmer of sparkle there on the right hand side, but not on the left. And I decided to make this more of a smooth blend than the really harsh line there. It almost looks like maybe it was under something, and when the leaves changed and maybe light got to one part, not the other. It's kind of interesting, but I think it's going to look funny in a painting, so you can do it however you want to. Make sure you don't have any puddles, and then you won't have blooms. The next one, I'm going to do all yellow first. That same yellow. So whatever yellow you use to mix your red, use that yellow here. Since it's just one color, I'm not even going to pre-wet it. I'm just going to go right in there. Quiet chat today. What's everyone talking about? I feel like I always miss out on what everyone's.
Well, we've got a couple different. We got some people talking about different ways to dry brushes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some people talking about the ASMR.
Oh yeah.
Because Paul Adams, he couldn't hear it. He was hoping to hear the tape peel off, like that. So people were talking about that.
I'm taking a little bit of phthalo blue and a little bit of that yellow, mixing up some green there. I'm going to go right into the wet paint with that. I'm going to trace the veins a little bit so they have a little bit of a kind of a speckly flow of green out from the edge.
Diane Murray, why does the tape not grip the paper?
Maybe I don't know. I'm surprised. I'm kind of surprised it doesn't, because packing tape usually seems pretty sticky, but I guess it's not that sticky. I guess it's maybe because I'm not leaving it on so long. But you know, I've had packing tape and I've taped up boxes and like it's come off really easily, so. And I'm dabbing in some of the red on its own because I want that kind of modelly, kind of freckly look up here.
Jessica Bagnell, Lindsay has said her mom is a painter, right? Does she have any published work?
Oh, no, my mom's a hobby painter. She does like decorative painting. She tends to paint like following other people's painting packets and tutorials. She strictly does it for fun. Oh, I also wanted to mention, you could use your, like, if you wanted more texture in the back, and I did it on my sample, for whatever reason I didn't do it in the painting, but you can scrape in with your credit card scraper too, as another quick way to get texture on your wet into wet washes. You could also do that in the veining of the leaf here, although I'm not going to, just because once you scrape in, that is there for good, and I don't necessarily want to have so much, to have that there permanently in case I change my mind on something. And this here looks just like that red. However, I did pick up a little bit of that mix, that orangey mix from the first one. I just wanted to have a little something that's to bridge the gap between that bright red and the yellow into the green. Okay, the next one is going to be, we're going to wet it because we're going to put 3 colors, but they're not all going to want to overlap our yellow, so we'll go in. Oh, I just noticed I still have a little bit of tape on this one. Maybe we'll hear the ASMR tape. I'm not sure. Hearing the gougy knife here. I like the sound of pens being like tapped, not tapped, but like when you have a handful of pens and they like tap them down on the table.
No, I don't like that.
You don't like that?
No.
I like the sound of plastic packages being opened.
Well, that sounds like you have some ASMR.
Maybe I do. I have like managed to somehow get a huge drop of water outside that leaf. So I think I'm gonna actually skip that. If you end up like going outside of the lines when you're pre-wetting, like I did there, I would really recommend letting that dry before you go in, because that paint is gonna go where it's wet and it's gonna whoosh out into that that area. So I'm actually gonna skip over here and make sure I got all the tape off that one, that tricky one. And I am gonna pre-wet it because it's gonna be a couple colors as well.
Escala Sobre, did the packing tape change the texture of the paper?
Nope. I mean, it might if you had. I think, I bet if you were using, this is cold press. I bet if you're using hot press paper, you might run more of a risk of it not wanting to let go. But since I only pressed it on the edges, and this is a cold press paper, so it's just by nature has hills and valleys and isn't going to be wanting to bond as well. Like, you stick something down on a smooth surface, it wants to grab it really well. If you stick it on a rough surface, like trying to stick a piece of tape onto cement, it's not going to grab because there's too much roughness there.
Paul enjoyed the gougy knife sound.
I don't like the sounds of people whispering though. That creeps me out. I see those the videos where people whisper. I don't like that. It's creepy.
I do have because I have a white noise app on my phone.
Uh-huh.
You can actually make your own custom ones if you want. They have ones that are all made, so I have one. It's a crackling fire and a purring cat.
Aww.
And I will say that, like, if I'm like
nice.
tense or anxious, because when we were flying back from Nashville to DC, there was some turbulence.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put that in, and it just kind of helped. Relax me a little bit.
How was your trip?
It was awesome. Nashville is great.
Oh, nice.
People do not make it up when they say Southern hospitality.
Oh, nice.
Everyone we met was super nice, super friendly, very helpful. The weather we had, because the hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. We had some rainy days, but we brought our raincoats and trekked along, and we would like to go back someday.
Yeah, it looked like you guys were having fun, just for the photos I saw you post.
Because we were doing strictly just Uber and Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had to stay kind of close to the downtown area, and there were places, like 45 minutes to an hour outside of Nashville that we would have liked to have gone to see, but it would have been expensive.
Yeah. So this is just the red, the same red that we were using. And I think I want to mix up a little bit of purple in this one because it does seem to have a little bit of a purple tone. So I'm going to use that same red and the ultramarine blue. It's not going to really give me a great purple, but it's not a bright purple on the flower either, on the leaf either. So that's perfect. You're going to give us kind of like a wine color. And I'm just dabbing it in where I see those darker patches on the reference photo. Well, I don't know if you can really see that because it's so red. I know the camera can tend to want to normalize red a lot. I think that's why, like, when they sell those artists' value finders, they're like a red piece of cellophane, and you look through and it kind of takes the color out of everything. So red does do something funny to our eyes and to cameras and stuff. I think it has to do with, it's hard for cameras and our eyes to tell between shades of red. I am going to dry this really quick because I had that wet area there and I don't want it to cause me any blooms or back runs. So, good time for questions if anybody has any.
Well, this is off, but Barbara McCullough asked me if I saw the Parthenon. Not only did I see the Parthenon, that's where the wedding reception was.
Oh,
within the
wow.
Parthenon. So I did get to see the Parthenon. I didn't have to pay to see it.
Nice. Even better. Love that. I hope the wedding couple were waiting a bit to take their honeymoon. It must be tough to get a flight.
They were going to Hawaii. They got married on Sunday and were flying out Tuesday, and they were going to Hawaii for 2 weeks.
Oh, we went to Hawaii on our honeymoon. It was nice. But we waited till winter. We got married in the summer and waited till winter because Maine winters are so oppressive.
Yeah. So yeah, but as far as I know, they got down there fine, and there doesn't seem to be any weather, like crazy weather headed to the Hawaii area.
Good.
But they haven't been posting much on Facebook because they're on their honeymoon and enjoying their honeymoon.
Good for them. So this is one of those multicolor ones, so I'm just kind of dropping in the colors where I see them and letting them mix and mingle together. Starting to see leaves change already.
I know. And it is funny because when we were in Nashville, people who are from Nashville don't listen to country music.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, they're like, no, we don't listen to country music.
Well, it's so urban. I usually don't see so much country listened to in urban areas.
Well, I mean, that's what a lot of like in the bars and stuff, they had a lot of country people, playing live music, but you talk to a lot of the locals, they're like, no, we don't listen to country. And back to stopping to talk about me, we had a few questions. Kelly Lester, does heating the paper with a heat gun stop the paint from spreading out anymore?
Well, when the paper's dry, it doesn't want to spread. The drier it is, the less it'll move, but it's not going to like stop it in its tracks. You want to just only wet the area of your paper that you want the paint to go to in the first place.
Mary Martin, I am new to watercolor and I am wondering if you save the leftover paint on your dish. I feel bad if I wash it off and don't use it.
I would say I wouldn't save the center, but you get better, and the more you do, the less you'll have a waste. Like I'm still using these colors, so I'll probably use up most of everything. I'll wash the middle, but these dabs on the outside, they'll stay. I mean, like some of these dabs, I'm so cheap. These are like little dabs from like some Cotman colors that I was testing that, it's like, well, they're still fine, until I use them. So they can stay they can let them dry out and stay there and they'll be good as new, but wash the center and wash the mixing areas on your, regular palettes, because if you try to like integrate those into your next painting, you're probably going to waste more paint just trying to get those to mix into colors that you can use. And it's not that much paint. It's like, probably half a penny's worth, if that. I'm surprised not to see Chewy. I thought she wouldn't leave your side when you got back.
John was home, and he was outside on the back deck in the sun, and she was sprawled out sunbeaming.
Oh, I don't blame her.
And she saw me getting ready to leave, and she didn't move. So I was like, okay, she's staying home with Dad, because John, we were home yesterday too, but we just kind of like unpacked and relaxed and. And then today he's like, no point going into work for a day, and so he took today off.
Oh, good.
He has drill this weekend on base too, so.
Yep. Well, Ty was so sweet. Your cat. I went over there, hopped in my lap, and
yes.
Loved the petting. My cats won't like.
Oh yes, well, because Jason was saying that she was being very snuggly with you.
Very sweet. I couldn't leave him sitting there on the couch petting her for Probably 45 minutes one
Oh
day.
yeah,
She was so
she would have let you do
sweet.
that all day. All day.
My cats might allow you to sit next to them on the couch
Perhaps.
if they're feeling generous, if they're feeling charitable. All right, I am going to give this a dry because this does feel like it's a little damp, and how you can tell is if you touch the paper with the back of your hand, if it feels cool, it's still damp, even though it feels dry, but cool, it's still damp. You want it to be room temperature. No other questions popping up right now? Oh,
no.
good.
We have a lot of chatting going on.
Good. I didn't do a show last week. I was just overwhelmed. It was one of those weeks.
Well, that, and, you know, then you would have had to do it yourself.
Yeah.
It would have been even more overwhelming.
I don't know how long I've been suspended from Google Plus, so I might not have been able to do it last week.
Diane Murray, how can we see Lindsay's published works and book illustrations?
Well, the second book that I've illustrated will be out very shortly. They were just finalizing it at the publishers, and then I will have a link to it where you can find it on Amazon or Main Authors Publishing or any other place that's easily available. One is linked up on my blog, The Rainbow Pants. You can click through and see the preview on Amazon. I don't know if there's any copies left. I think that one might have sold out, and I don't think they're going back into print with it. And then I have a list on my blog called My Crafty Resume, and most of the articles and projects that I published for magazines are in that list. So there's a couple places. You probably wouldn't be able to see the actual article, but you could go and see where it has been published. All right, so now we're going to start building up some layers on our leaves. And I think I'm going to use primarily this number 8 round because it holds quite a bit of water, but it still has a nice point, so I can get the details. I'm going to start off with this leaf, and I'm going in right with my red. And I am just going to go in and get the center stem to vein first. Try to keep your brush up on its tip with a 90-degree angle to the paper, and I'm lifting up as I go so my vein tapers. And I did put some guidelines as to where my veins were. I might stray from them a little bit if I'm looking at the reference photo or they just feel like too close together. The veins on this one some of them are matched and some of them are offset. Usually you have one or the other, but I'm noticing that. You don't need to paint in every detail. And they're generally thicker at the center vein, and then they taper off. And when in doubt, leave it out, because it's really easy to overwork a painting. And I think I want a little bit more color in the bottom of this, so I'm going to start by adding some color to the edge. And if I want to get that serrated edge in there, I'll have to do that with a different media, such as a pastel pencil or a gel pen at this point. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go back in and do that or not. I'm putting in my paint. I'm going to dry my brush. I just rinsed it and blotted it, but it's not completely dry, and I'm just going to soften the edge there. Rinse it again because my brush got filled with the paint. And then I'm just going to use my brush to carry. Gotta blot it off a little bit more. It's still a little wet. Going to use my brush to carry that pigment across in a nice blend. And I think I'll add a little bit of yellow in there, pretty thickly. Maybe I'll use yellow ochre because I've only used that in the background. That might be nice. Do a little yellow ochre, see how that looks. Dab some of that into the wet paint, and I'll get a little bit of a nice texture there as well. And maybe a little bit of the brighter yellow kind of on top in spots. because it's a little more opaque and it will stand up. There, I think I'm going to leave that one as it is and move to the next one. And again, I'm going to go in with that bright red and get that stem. I'm going to turn my paper though, because it's kind of tough to push the brush. It's easier to pull it. And I'm going to get a couple of these bottom veins with the red, but a lot of the veins on this one are actually green. And I'm going to use sap green for this. And these are coming off of the main stem. I used the sap green more in my sample than I mixed the green for this one, so I'll have to add this in a few more places to harmonize it. Although sap green is a mixed green, it's just not mixed with the colors I was using. And I'm going to dab a little color around here as well.
Diane Marie, how do you choose the craft or painting for the live shows? What inspires you?
Well, I will go somewhat from requests, and I will also go by something that's going to take about an hour. So I'll go with a longer. Something's going to take me a little longer to paint than what I would generally do as a recorded tutorial. I think it was Diane that actually asked about pastel pencils. I apologize if it's not. So I try to, like, if somebody's asking me about a couple techniques during the week, I kind of keep that in my mind, and I think, well, I'd like to kind of show those techniques then, because I know it's something that people are interested in. And I'm much more likely, if someone's asking about a technique, to work that into a picture, because I get so many requests. And it's also whatever I'm currently interested in painting myself, so that, I find that if I'm not interested in painting something, the tutorial doesn't come out very well. So it's kind of a combination of all those things. Okay, and I might do a few little freckles with that red color at the bottom, but not too many. That red is awfully overpowering, so just a few. All right, on the next one, we're going to use that mixed purple, which is our ultramarine blue, and that scarlet color, so it's kind of like a wine. It's not like a super vivid color. It's very desaturated, very earthy and fall-like, and we are going to use that on this leaf. I'm starting at the tip instead of the stem end, and I'm just going to I'm going to try to just keep it really, really light here. Let's see, make sure I'm in frame. And then make it thicker as I go by pressing down on my brush ever so slightly more. And then I am going to draw some veins out, not all of them because you don't see all of them, so I'm just kind of going back and forth between looking at the reference photo. So you can see I have a little dark one there, then they get darker down here, but they're not as consistent as they are like over here, or even on that one, which is really hard to see because it's just the red kind of canceled everything out. But that's got very consistently dark veins, and this one is very kind of hit and miss. So I want to make sure that I have that like that, because if I do them all the same, it's going to be a very boring painting. It's that difference that makes the nature look realistic. And down here we actually get a little bit of that freckling with that color, so I can dab in a little bit of that while I'm at it.
Miss Groves, with the green veins, were you adding a little water to soften them?
No, I just kind of dabbed around them with that same color, and that's what softened them. But I did when it was wet into wet, and I painted the green. I painted the green over the veins area, knowing that it was going to diffuse on the first wash of the wet leaf. So that's kind of how it has that effect. And I haven't decided if I'm going to use the pastel pencils on these, so if anybody has any opinions, please let Sarah know, and she'll kind of keep an eye out, see what you guys say, and then I'll go with what, you know, I guess if people want to see it, I'll do it, because then the people that didn't want to see it will have seen it to that point, and that way everybody can get what they want. They can look away if they don't want to see it. But if everybody says no, that would be awful, then I guess I won't bother doing it. Just remember that veins on a leaf are like branches on a tree, and you get that solid, thick branch in the middle, and then the branches get smaller as they work out from the, subsequent branches. So if you have little veins coming off of the bigger veins, those should be a little bit smaller. And I'm going to grab some green so that I can have some green veins, because you do see a couple veins that are more green there. I like how this one's turning out much more than the sample piece, because it took a little more time on it. I wasn't sure if the tape would work, so I really rushed it because I didn't want to spend a lot of time and have it ruined.
We have 3 votes for pastel pencils.
Oh, good. Okay.
Ian Jackson says splat, 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 splat.
I haven't had Rich in the comments in the Peanut Gallery in a while.
Oh, he hasn't been here. We have another vote for pastels, please.
Okay. All right, we'll just do one. I'll do the veins on this one, then we'll do some pastel then, because I don't think there's much benefit to adding more watercolor if we're going to go in with some pastel. And I'm going to go in with that same violet color that we just mixed, the ultramarine blue and the scarlet.
Another vote for pencils. I think we have more
okay.
pencil than anti-pencil.
All right, cool. Now, if you end up mixing your paint too watery, and I'm just going to show you what that looks like. This is a little watery for the detail that I want to do. I don't need to keep your instinct might be, well, I better put more paint and more paint and more paint till it gets thick enough. What you can do, you could actually dry it out a little bit with your dryer, but I found that if I just blot my brush, especially the belly of the brush, I can suck out a lot of the water, and then it will be fine to go in and do my detail work in. So rather than mixing up way more purple paint than I could ever use, I'll just do that.
Mayor Magoo, have you tried Faber-Castell pastel pencils, and your opinion?
I have not, but Faber-Castell does a really good job with pencils, so I bet they would be pretty good. I have the Derwents, and I have to say I'm not really that happy with the Derwent pencils, although I love their other pencils, so that might actually be contradicting what I just said about Faber-Castell, because they might be totally crap for pastel pencils. Like, I think Derwent pastel pencils are kind of crappy. There was a brand I loved called Van Gogh, but they're nice and soft, and they're a thin pencil, so you get some really good detail. But they stopped making them a few years ago. They were made by Royal Talons. But also, they're inexpensive generals pastel pencils are really nice. Now, I don't know if they're probably gonna fade, I guess, because that's probably why they're inexpensive. But performance-wise, I really liked working with them, and they're like, I don't know, probably around $10 for a pack of 12. They're not very expensive, so that's my two cents on that anyway. I'm gonna use the Derwent ones because you can find them, but they're just not my favorite. I feel like they're kind of scratchy and hard. If anybody's used the Pit Pastels though and wants to weigh in, please do, either in the comments in the replay or during the live chat, so that we can find out. Then I'm gonna add some little freckles with that same color. Been curious about the Carbothello, I think is the brand name. I see those advertised a lot. for pastel pencils, and I haven't used those either. I'm not really a pastel pencil person. I like them for accents, but um, I have probably more than I'll ever use up between the Van Gogh and the... So it's like, this doesn't make sense. It's not my medium. But if you want me to test them, guys, I mean, take one for the team, of course. That's why my craft room looks like this even after 6 months of decluttering.
But it's much more organized.
Maybe. I was pretty organized before. I was an organized hoarder.
Quilting BD3, have you tried painting on fabric?
Only a couple times with ink tints and fabric medium. Well, actually, no, I had done some back in the day, you know, acrylic painting on fabric in my toll painting days.
It was the
but
couch experiment.
Oh, the couch. I forgot about the couch. I blocked that memory out.
I know. I'll remember that one, though.
Actually,
I walked in and the couch was painted, and I was like, huh.
You just never know when you come here. I'll go use some of that red on its own, too, because it's a nice pop of color. Yeah, the couch. I actually like the couch painted much more than I like the couch regular, but I got vetoed on that.
Yeah, Jason did not.
No.
Baru Siva, suppose if you don't use pastel pencil in this painting, would you do anything more with watercolor, or is this it?
I'd probably call it a day, quite frankly. But that'd be completely up to you. I think I'll put a few freckles in that with that violet color on this one too.
Valerie Connell says she has the Derwents and she likes them. Joe Maskey says the Carbothellos have the perfect hard-soft balance.
Oh, that's good to know.
And Valerie has them too and likes them.
Okay, that's good to know. I know.
And a couple other people have said they've tried the Derwents and do like them.
Okay, so maybe I'm just the odd person out on this one. I find them just to be really scratchy. Maybe I've got a bad batch or something. Okay, so we're going to work with some pastels now. And also, I think I'm going to grab my white gel pen. And this is the Uniball Signo. It's my favorite white gel pen. I use it for watercolor highlighting, and I also use it often in my rubber stamping and scrapbooking. It's just such a wonderful pen to have. And I am going to, there's a very, very micro, dainty, serrated edge that it almost looks smooth when you look at it at a glance, but it is there. And it's highlighted in a few areas, and those will be the areas that I would want to kind of pick it up. And also this will give me really good detail, whereas the pastel pencils are going to not give me so much detail because they're just, they're chunkier, especially the Derwents. They have a thick lead to them. So I'm just kind of here and there adding that little, almost like just a little highlight where it shows that the edge is serrated. You can go over the Gel Impact, this Uniball Signo gel pen with watercolor and tint it. So it will look really bright sometimes, and if you don't like that, just let it dry and go over it with watercolor. If you go over it wet, it will blend in, and you might end up with a mess. So, or it might work for you, you know.
Valerie says she uses the Derwent pastels on sanded paper.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense because that would help it let go of its pigment a little bit better. And I should have started the other side of my paper because I'm liable to put my hand in that gel pen before it dries. So I'm just making a little zigzag line here. It's just going to highlight that edge and bring that line quality that I want. It looks really sharp next to a shadow because you get that nice bright contrast. It's really easy to overdo it though. I know I find myself overdoing it a lot when I'm doing this. And I'm just moving this because I was going to drag my hand through it. Just highlighting here and there where I see a whiter vein. Now this, just make sure your serrations are kind of, they're pointing away from your tip of your stem. So otherwise, if I had the serrations going that way, it wouldn't make sense. They're always going to be going kind of away from your stem. Okay. And I don't think I'm going to use that on the screws. I had done it on the sample on the screws, but I had to kind of dab it off. It was a little too bright. So we're going to do that with a pastel pencil. I don't know how many pastel pencils are in the line of Derwent. I've got the set of 24, and that's what I'll be using colors from today. I'm going to start off with, I think I'll start off with this burnt sienna, and I'm going to try adding some highlights to my little screws up here. So I'm going to go around the little slots in them. You can see there the difference between those two with a highlight. And I can always go on and add more, but I just kind of want to just accent them. They're not the star of the show. The leaves are the star of the show, but if these have a little bit of detail to them, they'll look good. I also don't tend to sharpen my pastel pencils. It's probably a bad habit. I probably should sharpen them a little bit, but well, that one really doesn't have much. I'm just going to get a little bit of a something. And this, because it's got that dry texture to it, it will give you a little bit of a rusty look. Right, now if I wanted to put a little bit of white on a couple of these for more highlight, I can do that. Just on the brightest ones though. Now I think I'm also going to go at this point in with white onto some of the like kind of reflected areas, and that can help me kind of combine the white gel pen in with the leaf if there are areas where it just looks a little too stark. The lighter you color, the less pigment will be released, so you can control it. And I usually just use my finger to blend, but they're not as soft as your regular soft pastels, so you might not blend as easily. You might want a little blending stump if it doesn't want to move for you. They are water soluble, so if you did get in a situation where it was way too dark, you could go in with a damp brush, but keep in mind it is also going to liquefy whatever you have underneath. So generally the other times I would use pastel pencils would be if I was coloring a stamped image, or I was getting the like a sketch down for like a pastel painting, because these are a harder material you can layer over with other pastels, and it's not going to really remove that. And it's not going to make a mess if you have to erase, because it's just not going to release quite so much pigment. The reason I'm doing the white first is because it's the most opaque, so I know I'll be able to go over with other colors if I want to. Alright, I think that's all I want to do for the white. I will leave the colors out so I can hopefully write them down in the video description. Hopefully.
People will want to know what colors were used for sure.
I know, and I'm really bad about that. I have been, good enough to patting myself on the back to put them in, like watercolor shades at least before I begin, usually. Now this is deep cadmium, so it's a nice warm yellow. I can go over any of those yellow areas if they're too, I'm sorry, over any of the white areas if they're too white. And brighten it up over here a little bit. This is nice for adjusting, like if you're like, oh, that leaf didn't show up from the background quite so much. You could go in and adjust it a little bit. And I like to skip around. It just takes it saves a little time and also gives your eyes a break between leaves. So if you just kind of skip from one to the other, you're not going to get kind of immune to how something really looks. You can see how nice and bright that was on top of the white. And now I'm going to go in with more of a red. And the reds on this are a little, they're a little weird. So I think I'll go with Geranium Lake. This is actually a little cooler and pinkier than I'd want, but I don't really have a real bright red. I think it's probably because it's a pastel. And I mean, you can get really bright red pastels, but they're also super soft because you can't have a lot of filler or binder. It's got to be pretty much pigment. So once they add those, white fillers and binders, it cuts it down, makes it look more pink, because they have to add chalk to it basically to make it, or clay to make it strong enough to stand up to being in a casing, being skinny in a casing. I find that with watercolor crayons as well. In this case, I am going to grab this orange and blend right over that so I don't forget what I intended to do if I skip over to another leaf. So I have to mix those colors. And you could also do this with colored pencil. Colored pencils are translucent. They will stand up. They're more opaque than watercolors. They will hold their own on top of watercolors. They're a great way to adjust, especially for botanicals. And if you accidentally got a smear or something, you could erase it with your white plastic eraser too. The pastels, not the watercolor, not the colored pencils. Okay. I kind of feel like it's a little flat here. And over here, I'm just gonna add a little bit of that red in there. I like the texture from the paper. And it looks less alarming once you do it to a couple leaves. This technique here, I'm just doing little circles, so I impart that little, how it's kind of fuzzy and broken up in there. By doing little circles like that, I'm just kind of imparting that color, and it's getting that same little texture that the leaves happen to have on them.
Ian Jackson, Lindsay, how about dipping the pastel in water and applying it then?
I wouldn't do that with a pastel pencil because it will just kind of just turn into smudge, kind of like wetting an eye shadow. It would be like a smudgy paste. It doesn't have the stability to hold up to that like you can with a watercolor crayon or a watercolor pencil. And you might ruin your pencil actually. It might actually wick up so much water that you ruin the integrity of the pencil. really like this. This technique's working out really well to give me that texture that I want. I probably just need to give these pencils another try. Okay, and I'll do a little bit of orange on some of these areas where it just like, wow, that looks pink. I'm just hitting it with a little bit of that orange in the same technique to warm up the color. It's not really adding a different color so much as it is just shifting that pinky red into more of a rich red. And let's see if there's any other colors I want to put in there. Maybe you could do a little bit of that texture in the back if you want to add to the weathered wood texture. You can go in. This is a umber. And I'm just going over any of the veining that I did with the fan brush. If you don't have your shadows dark enough and you want to go in there, you can use that same color for your shadows. And it just naturally gives you that nice texture. Wow, we didn't do any credit card scraping on this. I can't believe I did a wood grain and no credit card scraping.
It's because you're that amazing.
So I forgot what a credit card scraper was because it was in that part of my brain that holds the information on how to run an encoder, I guess.
It's alright. It's okay. We did it. See?
Yeah, I'm glad this worked actually because I preferred using an encoder because I felt like I got a little bit better quality. But when it stopped working one day, that's like, when it's fight or flight, I'm definitely flight. I'm like, I'm not dealing with it. Simple mode.
Well, and knock on wood,
Yeah.
we've had a smooth video so far.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll try it next week.
Yeah. I'm feeling optimistic. I was just dreading, like, because I love doing the live shows, but I was dreading it because I was like, oh, I just don't want a technical difficulty. I can't cope. This is very encouraging. And there's also a kind of a light tealy color here. I think might be nice on some of the wood here to kind of give that rubbed paint look. Brighten up some of the planks. And also it kind of helps the orangey colors stand out a little bit. Mostly in the highlight areas, not so much in the shadows, so you want to be aware of that. Okay, and I'm going to go back in with the white really quick on some of the wood, where the planks, like on the edge of the planks, just to give them a little bit of a burst of highlight and separation. Okay, I'm just wondering how it might look if I went in with this ivory black in the super dark areas. I'm going to give it a try because I don't use black very much, but
part of the painting is off camera.
Oh.
Slide it over a little bit. Yeah.
There.
Toll Moore, are chalk or oil-based pastels better for a beginner?
I think it really depends on what other art you do. Like, I'll use oil pastels as like a sketching medium for oil paints, because it will like turn, if I go over it with oils or I go over it with paint thinner, it will turn into like an oil paint. But that's pretty much the only time I use oil pastels. I found chalk pastels are a little bit more versatile. And, if I went over this with an oil pastel, there's a chance that oil pastel could deteriorate the paper, but the chalk pastel will not seep into the paper and affect it at all. So I would say if you're mostly a water media artist, I would go with either a chalk pastel, or soft pastel is the proper name, or I would use a water-soluble oil pastel, because then you have a little more versatility. You can use it with watercolors and whatnot.
Brenda Collins Geeks. I just bought a 12 set of Stabilo chalk pastel pencils. I don't know the brand, but it was the only one at the art store. Does Lindsay know anything about that brand?
Stabilo, are they might be the ones that make the Carbo Othello that we were just talking about. Not, I haven't used that brand, but I'm sure they're fine. Give them a try, play with them.
Best Dance Studio Walnut. When I re-wet the core Viridian Green, it turns into a weird, bubbly, almost soapy texture instead of re-wetting like normal paint. Is this normal?
Yep, Viridian is awful. It's like that in just about any brand. I find the same thing with Winsor & Newton. It doesn't matter. It's Rembrandt, it's the same. It's just that pigment is so hard to re-wet. I think they almost add, they might even add a soap to it, some sort of detergent to make it re-wettable at all. It's honestly, that's probably one of those colors buy from the tube, and you squirt out as much as you need it, and don't mess with it in a pan. It's kind of a rough color. The real true Viridian hue is so much easier to use.
And we're all caught up.
We're caught up?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Please check out our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com, if you need any of the art supplies we use today. They have fantastic prices, and they have a coupon code that's in the video description to save you, I think it's like, is it 25% in free shipping on coupon-eligible items? I think. I double-check. I think it's a string of words, of a string of letters. I can't say it. You'll have to just copy and paste it, because otherwise we'll end up not getting the right coupon for you. If you need the reference photo or any other materials, there's more info on my blog, thefrugalcrafter.wordpress.com, and that's it. I'm gonna hit a bunch of buttons and hope this thing shuts off. So thanks for coming by, Sarah, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
Happy crafting.